Well, welcome to the Independent Democratic Coalition's press availability. On Valentine's Day, we lost a great man, Representative Max Guttenberg Jr., who passed away. I'm proud that the legislature had dedicated the Judiciary Committee room after him. It's one of the highest legislative honors that a person can receive, is having a committee room named after him. And it's only appropriate because Max spent so much time in the Judiciary Committee. All the years he served in the legislature, he was on that committee, as well as always insisted that his office be there on that floor to be close to that committee room. The process this far in the budget, we have budget subcommittees will be closing out their work this week for the FY 2017 budget. House Finance Committee is planning on wrapping up the work on the budget and hope to have something on the floor by March 9th. The numbers that come out of those budget subcommittees are going to help us determine basically where our priorities are going to be. My biggest fear is that a recession may be created if we unnecessarily cut for the sake of cutting and not paying attention to the effects on the economy. The members of Alaska Independent Democratic Coalition are committed to finding and embracing more efficient ways to deliver state services, but we don't want to support draconian cuts that will make it more difficult to live, work, and prosper here in Alaska. What we need is a fiscal plan. Part of a fiscal plan is looking at revenues and a sustainable budget that will help grow the economy. And so I'm hoping that we can find some bipartisan consensus, people coming together, setting aside majority-minority status, and come up with a fiscal plan that treats all Alaskans fairly. The budget revenue options all have to be part of the plan, and how that all comes together is still in the works. President Gara?
Thank you. Good morning. The legacy of this legislature shouldn't be a recession, but my big fear is that is what's going to be the legacy of this recession. If it is, it's not something that's going to get my vote. We owe Alaskans something better than lost jobs, a damaged economy, damaged home values, and an atmosphere where people start considering leaving the state, and that is happening already. We don't want to lose our engineers, our teachers, our nurses, our professionals, our workers, and that's what we're facing right now. We also shouldn't tear apart the basic safety net for seniors, for children, for those with needs. We shouldn't tear apart our job training programs, which have been cut for 2 years in a row. What I want to do is provide a brighter opportunity for people, not a damaged opportunity for people. Right now, we're going down the latter path. There's a draft report from the Institute of Social and Economic Research. It's not finalized, and it will be soon by Gunnar Knapp. What he shows is for every $100 million of cuts, the state loses roughly 1,200 jobs in the private sector and public sector. Because when you cut state grants and state employees, it ripples through the private sector. It's less money for people to shop at grocery stores with, less money for people to shop at hardware stores with, less money for people to go to businesses with. And that's why it ripples through the economy. At $500 million in cuts, which some people are talking about in this building, that's probably about 7,000 jobs in the private sector and public sector. It's lost people who make the state work. Yesterday we introduced an oil tax reform bill. It comes on the heels of a report we received from the Department of Revenue, which shows some major flaws in the oil tax system. Right now, for all fields in the future, and for all fields since 2002, the state receives no production taxes under oil production statute. None. That's at $30 a barrel. If prices double, if prices go all the way up to $75 a barrel, that rule applies still. No production taxes from our oil, even if oil prices more than double. For fields before 2002, the bigger fields, we have a flat, minimal, sort of emergency 4% tax. That doesn't increase until above $76 a barrel. We have to do more than guarantee the state the inability to fund schools, the inability to move the state forward. And that should be part of the discussion for a balanced fiscal plan. And with that, I'll turn it over to Representative Guttenberg.
Thank you. I'm always amazed every day what kind of a state we live in. This is an amazing place, and we have a phenomenal amount of resources. And when we're going through this exercise, this budget exercise, fiscal crisis exercise, there are a few things that we're not dealing with that are a great concern for me. And the first one, which is a driver for everything that we do, and that is the rising cost of health care. In every budget, in every state, in every borough, it's the rising cost of health care. It's something that we pay for. It's a driver in the budget, and we're not addressing it. I've been working on some health care legislation, and I hope we get there because it's a big part of what we're doing. And as we're putting pressure on everybody else, on all the departments and all everything that the state does, we're not addressing that. That's a huge driver of our rising budget. And the other thing, which I've introduced legislation to, which will be read across tomorrow, is a broadband bill, which creates a state corporation to take care of the middle mile that will drive down the cost and availability of health care. Every city, borough, state, department in the state, every library, every tribal entity, every clinic in the state has a problem with broadband. Broadband access, broadband speed, broadband availability. Its cost and its availability. The state needs to take a handle on this, and I've introduced legislation that would do just that, and it won't cost anything.
Thank you. I know we're sort of in a dour mood, and we were talking about this just before we came down here. But I'm really optimistic about Alaska's future. We have, an incredible amount of natural resources. We've got great talent within the building. We've survived through floods, fires, famine, to become a great state. My parents moved up to this great state in the 60s to go to college at a first-rate institution at the University of Alaska at Fairbanks. It was the premier institution for research. It was a premier institution for auroral studies, and that's why they came up here. And they realized this was the kind of place that we want to live, work, and raise a family. I live in the house that my parents bought in the 60s. But when you see some of these massive draconian cuts to things like the university, $62 million in 1 year, when they just sustained 3 previous years' cuts, cutting all research, all athletics, those are cuts that kind of leave me saying, what kind of a state are we going to live in? Can we call this the great state of Alaska in the future? Can we call this institution at the University of Alaska at Fairbanks a premier institution? I don't think that's the dream that we want to leave. I don't think that these cuts have a lot of vision to them. I think that these cuts, quite simply put, are cuts for the sake of cutting. And I think that we owe it more to the people of the state of Alaska to find real solutions. As was said by the leader, a fiscal plan has to come in place. That includes a sustainable budget, and that includes revenue and a way to pair the two. And right now, we just haven't seen that from the legislative majority. Our caucus is dedicated to working together. We've asked to work together. We've asked to sit in the same room. When the leader and the Senate leader actually said that we should have a caucus of the whole, a committee of the whole, and work together. That's the kind of leadership that I think Alaskans are looking for at this time. That's the kind of leadership that I think we should expect from leaders. But these draconian cuts to the university, to education, we've heard some draft solutions to the health and social services budget, which says we have to cut some senior benefits. Seniors that are making above $25,000 a year. These are seniors that have built this state. I just think that those cuts are unjustified. I think cuts to behavioral health and substance abuse treatment in the 15% range are going to leave a state devastated and impoverished. And that's not the kind of vision that I'd like to leave. That's not the kind of legacy this legislature should leave this session. Thank you.
Okay, and with that, we'll open up to questions. If you will, please state your name and affiliation.
Becky Board, the Associated Press. I guess I have 2 questions. One for the finance members. You've been hearing the different plans for use of permanent fund earnings. What are your thoughts, I guess, on those options? And then for the majority or the minority leader, to talk about a fiscal plan in what you see as the absence of one, what would you propose?
Well, right now, we need to have those dialogues taking place. We have a lot of bills in committees right now. The reason why we're in the suspension of other bills until we have this plan going forward is to focus on that, work on that. And so what we're asking is that as we look at the budget, we do more on looking at the revenue so we can have a complete package going forward. And the governor courageously put forward a plan that has this philosophy of we're all in this together. Of course, oil taxes, looking at mining taxes, looking at some of the sin taxes, looking at gasoline taxes, potentially income tax with different ways of doing the permanent fund. I don't think anybody has a single answer just quite yet, but by focusing on revenue as we're doing the budget, I believe we'll come up with some pretty good solutions. And as far as the first question, there was
Thoughts on the permanent fund earnings proposals that finance has heard? They've heard 3 so far. What their thoughts are on that, if anything stands out.
Okay.
go ahead. You can take it right there.
All right. So, yeah, we had the, David Teal from Ledge Finance had the presentation on flow charts, comparisons. There's still bubbles moving in the air. My concern is the impact on Alaskans, as much as it is on how the revenue moves, where the dividends are. I mean, when we start talking about cutting people's dividends, we're impacting different Alaskans differently and heavier on some parts of the segment of the community. I always remember when I represented Western Alaska and what it meant, what a dividend check meant to those families versus the urban areas where it's a completely different story. So we're weighing those. That's a big part of it. What happens with an income tax, what happens with a sales tax. I mean, all those other components that are out there, they're on the side. Those, the impacts of everything that we do is a concern that I have.
You guys want to add to it?
I'm hoping the legislature will listen. We shouldn't make our decisions based on polling, but we should listen to our constituents. And the one thing the constituents favor the most is logical, that we shouldn't have oil fields that produces 0% production tax, that we should fix that as part of a plan, that getting no money for all oil fields after 2002 and all future oil fields is a pathway to poverty for the state. If you're looking for a way to balance the effects on the public so that you're not just hitting those with the greatest needs the hardest, we need to look at reforming some things the public wants reformed. They also want us to close the loophole that has most corporations in the state not paying the state's corporate tax. Those are 2 things that the public through polling and the public through logic say should be part of the fiscal plan. But if the fiscal plan is only going to hit at the people who have the least, and that's a permanent fund only plan, that's not a plan. That's a hit on people who have trouble affording clothing and food and educating their children. Something comprehensive that goes, that everybody contributes to is something I'd like to consider. But if it's only going to be hitting people who get 20% of their income from the dividend, and that's the first 50% of wage earners in the state, 20% of their income comes from the dividend. If that's the plan, that's not a plan. That's and it'll harm the economy because if you only rely on the dividend, you've got to hit that much harder than if you rely on a broad array of things, and then you wouldn't have to hit the dividend so hard.
Andrew Kitcheman, Alaska Public Radio Network. If the budget only includes cuts to the permanent fund and to the budget, would you oppose spending from the CBR?
I don't think that's doing enough. I think Alaskans are expecting more from us this session. This is our opportunity to do it and do it right. One of the concerns that everybody has is spending our savings accounts too quickly. And so we have to look at new revenues as we go forward. And that includes from all industries as well as, whether or not and how Alaskans are going to be individually sharing the burden. So all of this is going to be looked at, but I think we need to do more than that this session.
That's good.
Austin Baird from Channel 2. If you can't support the higher level of cuts that some Republicans are calling for, and if you can't definitively say which of the permanent fund earnings proposals you support, then what do you see as the biggest piece of fiscal solution? What's the biggest piece for anyone who wants to answer that? And I know for you, I'm going to guess oil tax, but I mean.
No, because that's not going to solve the budget deficit by itself, and it would be fake for anybody to say that. First of all, and in defense of our friends across the aisle, we cut $700 million from the budget last year. The governor's proposed another $100 million of cuts. We're beyond the point where we're cutting fluff, and now folks are cutting to the bone. Drug and alcoholism treatment for people who are otherwise going to end up on the street and cost us money in jail. Education. Do we want a future for our children, or do we want to keep cutting at their opportunity? At this point, you're at the point where you're cutting at educational opportunity and the future for people. So we support cuts to waste, but cuts that are so deep that the university indicates it'll push us into a recession, that's not the smart way to go. So we do support cuts, just not cuts that cause a recession. And in terms of a fiscal plan, everybody has to get out of their ideological boxes. We all need to work together. And that will create a broad fiscal plan. But a permanent fund only fiscal plan hits those with the greatest needs, children, the hardest. That's not a fiscal plan to just cut the dividend.
And let me add that there is no silver bullet in this. Cutting, we know, you can't cut your way to prosperity. That's not the answer. We have to look at revenues. But what happens through our process and what happens without stepping back and looking at everything comprehensively is you start compartmentalizing everything, and individually it's easy to say no, 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 no. What we need to do is look at it as a whole and figure out how to pull those parts in to where everybody can agree on this is the best way, the best solution for Alaska. But the process that we have with the budget subcommittees and with the committees, I think we just need to have a bigger open dialogue on how to move Alaska forward through these tough times. But when you compartmentalize it, you end up saying no to everything, and we don't want to see that happen.
Yeah, and part of my concern is there's been no economic analysis. Gunnar Knapp just came out with something. It's preliminary. It's not done. But how hard do we hurt the economy when we do these cuts? How hard do we hurt the university? How hard do we hurt DNR, Department of Labor, Fish and Game? What are we losing in the state? And then on the equation on the other side, what is the economic hit on the permanent fund plans, on the dividend, losing the dividend for so many communities? The same thing with community revenue sharing. I mean, if we cut out community revenue sharing, can you imagine having what happened to Flint, Michigan, with the water supply happening across the state, what the impact of that would be? So there's no economic balance, impact analysis across the state on what we're doing. And that's problematic for us. Where do we need to go? What is the right thing to do? How do we not hurt the state?
And Austin, we got to cut waste, but we can't cut opportunity. And I think that the real focus of this majority has been on cutting things to the bone. Again, we can spend less money on things like substance abuse and treatment, but when we have an epidemic in the Mat-Su Valley with heroin, I just think it's an unwise cut. I think it's going to end up costing the state more, not just in the short term, but in the long term. As far as revenues, again, we've proposed meeting together, sitting toe to toe, talking about these things in a group style, without press or with the press, but really just talking together about it. And I don't think that we've seen a lot of movement, especially on I'll say actually on the House side, we've actually seen a lot more movement than in the Senate, where they're talking about guns on campus. think it distracts from the overall issue, which is it's the budget, and it's the people that are impacted by the budget. Seniors that are going to not be able to take advantage of something like the low-income heating and energy assistance program that has been around. Seniors that are going to be cut from the senior benefits rolls this next year. I think it's got to be in a holistic way, approached in a holistic way, with both cuts to waste, not opportunities, and revenues, and it's got to be an entire package that balances this budget.
Okay, Shan.
Shauna Crondall, Alaska Education Update. You haven't talked much about what cuts you've heard at K-12 might take. Have you heard any rumors about any specific cuts to K-12?
There's a draft proposal out there that cuts a very successful teacher mentoring program that helps teachers become better teachers, which in turn creates better educational opportunity. There has been discussion that I hope is just a rumor that not even the minimal $50 per student funding increase will be left in the budget by the end of the year. I hope that's wrong, because even that $50 the governor proposed, that leaves us about $15 million less in school funding than we were 2 years ago. And that's not a way to keep families in the state. When families are most focused on quality schools for their children, they're going to leave if they don't see a commitment to public education, and we're going to lose engineers and teachers and doctors and workers and people all across the economic sector. It's going to harm the economy. But we're only hearing rumors of not funding the $50 increase that frankly still leaves us behind inflation, even if it were to pass. So hopefully those are just rumors.
David?
Well, you know, a child only gets one first grade, one second grade, and it's loss of opportunity. And it's, you know, we know the average time in prison, the average reading level in prison is third grade. You know, why enhance that? Why create opportunities for that to stay there? Our children are our future. I mean, we talk about it. We need to live it more. We need to be more committed to it. I mean, education. There are teacher gaps. There's communities, my community, where they can't find teachers. That's a problem. If you can't find teachers, you have to ask yourself why you can't bring teachers in. Why are we not graduating enough? And I think overall, we don't give teachers enough respect. We don't pay enough respect for them. Whatever it is, they're living on the edge. There's always pink slips. We haven't done a good job on dealing with education. When you look at the picture, we've created so much uncertainty in the education community. That alone has to hurt.
And we also want to keep the title Department of Education Early Development. We want to keep the early development part of that. So I'm proud that the governor had reinstated the pre-K programs, early development programs with parents, teachers, best beginnings, and we're going to do what we can to preserve that as well, because that's the best bang for the buck. There's huge benefits in that, and it makes your education dollars go a lot further. Next question.
Liz Raines with KTVA. I spoke with Senator Kelly recently about the tax proposals that are out there, and he seems to think that they're too piecemeal, they're too many to get through, that they wouldn't create a significant dent unless we had them all together. So I guess I would say, what's your reaction to that, and what, if we can't get through them all this session, which ones would you prioritize beyond changes to oil taxes?
Well, what's unfortunate is that we've introduced bills to start a Ways and Means Committee to tackle that and to focus on that. We've also gone into special procedures right now to focus on things that will save the state money, as well as revenue enhancements. And that's not going as efficient as possible. I think that we can be doing more. I would expect to see more committees scheduled. And I also expected to see our budget subcommittees happen more during the day rather than early mornings and late at nights to accommodate that. Yeah, we're going to keep moving forward as best that we can. I think we need to accomplish it. Can we do everything? Possibly not. But let's try to do everything this session.
I can just say, the Senator Kelly's my senator, and we meet frequently. To say that we don't have enough time to finish something when we're only 34 days into session, I think is unfortunate. If we're focused on the budget, then I think we can accomplish great things. We're looking at the same numbers he is. He's been a member of the Finance Committee, either in the House or the Senate, for more than a decade. So he has the same numbers that we're looking at, and he's got to see and he's got to recognize that there's a significant budget gap, and we are drawing from savings faster than we can replenish. And I think that I hope that the Senate and I hope that House leadership can work together to find a solution before the end of this 90-day session ends.
It's not rocket science on putting together fiscal plans. So the idea that we don't have time, I don't accept. Here's what I do understand, that going beyond cutting waste, which we should cut waste, but going beyond that and raising the economy down to the ground with $500 million of cuts, as some people are talking, that's a recession. And I would hope people would stop talking about that and stop proposing that. But it's not hard to put together a fiscal plan. It just means you actually have to work together. But a fiscal plan is not a recession plus only hitting those with the least ability to pay as your only revenue-raising solution.
Other questions? Okay, just a couple reminders. We have Representative Max Gruenberg Jr.'s funeral in Anchorage this Thursday, starting at 5 o'clock at the Beth Shalom Temple. And then Anchorage Caucus this weekend is happening as well. I think that's from 1 to 3.
Don't look at me.
Yeah, and so thanks for being here today, and we'll be happy to take any more questions afterwards.
There's also a Medicaid discussion at 11:30 over at the Baronoff with a panel of legislators.